Paul Newman was an American actor, film director, race car driver, and entrepreneur. He was the recipient of numerous awards, including an Academy Award for The Color of Money. He won several national championships as a race car driver, a political activist and humanitarian. He raised and donated nearly $1 billion to many charities. He had 6 children and was married to Oscar-winning actress Joanne Woodward for 50 years. He died in 2008 at the age of 83. The Extraordinary Life of an Ordinary Man is the unpublished memoir of the Hollywood legend, which his family recently discovered, long forgotten and left in a basement. It's now due to be published 14 years after his death. With us on the line to talk about it is his youngest daughter, Clea. Welcome to the show, Clea.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a real honor to have you with us on the show. And what an amazing find this must have been. Can you talk us through when you came across this?
Well, it was kind of a crazy find. My best friend, Emily, is actually a producer who was looking, it's kind of a long story. We were actually painting the house, and she was looking for some papers and some transcripts of other interviews. Actually found it down in our laundry room, of all things. It was crazy. And then we found in Dad's and actually both of my parents' storage unit his transcripts that said PN history on them in 2 big boxes. And we had actually thought they were all lost. And so it was pretty exciting to have found them.
Oh, I bet. And did you all then get together to go through it all?
We did. It was actually during COVID. And we had started reading some of the other transcripts first before we had gotten to Dad's. And then we all got to read Dad's, which I think my sister had once said, she said, well, it would have been great if we had been able to read them before he passed away. It would have made for some very interesting conversations. But it was eye-opening, I would say, the very least.
In a positive or a negative way, a bit of both, I guess.
I think, I'm not sure if I would qualify it as positive or negative. I think it just was eye-opening to understand how he felt about himself and how different that seemed to be about how everyone felt about him.
Yeah.
I mean, it was very surprising.
I mean, he was a huge family man, wasn't he? He was very well known for how much he loved not only his wife but his children, his family. He was very known for that. Did that come across in his writing?
It was, but I think the complexity of his childhood made it very complicated, and I think it took him a long time to resolve some of that, to then get to a place where he felt really comfortable kind of sharing himself with his family. Yeah, he was kind of such a private person, and I think going through even this interview process for all of these years was almost therapeutic for him. And he kind of emerged on the other end, really kind of renewed and just extraordinary version of himself.
Yeah, he had
that makes any sense.
No, it does. It absolutely does. I mean, he had a really traumatic childhood, didn't he? He didn't have a good relationship with his parents at all.
Yeah, I think it was just very complicated. I think he, I think that was what kind of followed him around in most of his childhood, youth, and as a young person. I mean, probably way into his 40s and 50s, actually, kind of resolving all of that, and as he would say, being considered a decoration. I think that's pretty hard for people to get over.
Yeah. One of the other things he talks about in the book, which I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear, is his lack of success with women.
I know. Well, he was, what did he say? How did he put it? He said he had his feet firmly planted in Shaker Heights. You know, he was brought up in a very controlled environment. And I think when he met Mom, she was so kind of freely herself and, you know, almost kind of like a hippie, not really, but just very artistic and kind of freely herself. And that kind of brought out the best in him, I think.
Yeah.
Or kind of this new emerged version of him.
Yeah. And a lot of people will know, certainly know the phrase, but maybe not know that it was your dad who was the one to say it when he was talking about the love that he had for your mum. Why go out for a hamburger when you have steak at home? Just brilliant.
Well, poor Mom hated that. She was not amused. I remember her saying in some interview, "My God, why am I considered a piece of meat?" You know.
Yes. Yes, two ways of looking at it, I guess.
Two ways, but he certainly meant it, you know, in a heartfelt way, I think.
Yes. And he talks obviously a lot about his acting career, both early yearnings to become an actor and then, of course, his acting rivals at the beginning of his career, the likes of Brando and Dean. I mean, it must be great to read and hear.
It really is. It's, well, the whole book is just what's so interesting and what was actually, I think, very difficult for all of his children to read is that you really hear his voice. It's like he's speaking to you. And it was really interesting to hear how he felt about his acting career because he talked about it in kind of, you know, at 50,000 feet. You know, he didn't really get into the details when he talked to us about his acting career. And so it was really interesting to read it because it was so specific, you know, how he felt about certain things, how he felt about certain roles, how his relationships with people. And I don't think we knew most of that. I mean, I might have known a little bit of it, but it wasn't in detail.
And what was it like growing up with him as a father, being so famous? How was that for you and your sisters?
You know, it's one of those funny things. We spent much of our time in California, but we also spent equally as much time in Connecticut. And, you know, Connecticut, we were just kind of like normal kids, and it was actually pretty great. In Hollywood, it was a very different, you know, a lot of paparazzi, a lot of craziness, a lot of people chasing us down the street, and so we kind of got the flip side of the flip side of both, I guess. And personally, I preferred Connecticut.
Yes.
You know, we could run around in the woods and have friends over, and it was a lot more complicated growing in Hollywood.
And can you remember when you first realized that your father was famous and everybody wanted to be around him?
Once I got to be old enough to realize what he did for a living was maybe different than what other people did for a living, as well as my mother. It was funny. We didn't really, you know, Mom and Dad would just say, you know, this is our job. So this is what we do for a living. And so I don't remember thinking that they were so much as different as that their job took them away. so that was actually more, I was always jealous of my friends who had parents who worked and then came home every night.
Yeah.
So for me, it wasn't necessarily a great thing. I mean, there were certainly perks, but I miss my parents, so I wanted them home.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. And how about his writing about his time as a race car driver? That was a huge passion for him, wasn't it?
Absolutely. That was that's what I say. That's what I call his happy place. He loved everything about racing. He loved the people. He loved just the environment. He loved the fact that he wasn't respected as a driver until he had really gotten to a level of driving that he worked so hard for. I mean, he loved getting away from all the hubbub and just being at the track and hanging out with his, I used to call them his peeps, his people. He loved being in the cars. He loved the complexity of the engines and talking about different skills and learning how to drive each track. And he loved everything about it, the technicality of it. He was kind of like he almost was an inventor in his mind. He used to make all these crazy inventions. So, the tweaking of cars and things like that was very exciting for him.
Yes. And obviously he was a real philanthropist as well. I mean, incredible to be donating nearly $1 billion to various charities over the years. That obviously meant a lot to him as well, being able to give back. Absolutely.
He always said, well, not always said, but as he got older, he used to say to us always that he wanted his legacy to be his philanthropy. And he felt that and always taught us that the most important thing that you can do if you're lucky enough to have a good life is to give back. And he did that in spades. We have, we've all heard about the food company and our camps for seriously ill children. In fact, we have a super special camp, Barrettstown in Ireland. That was our first camp that we started in Europe, and truly his passion. I mean, one of Dad's other happy place was being at camp and being with the kids and the families. That some of my most special memories are of him there.
And I guess because he had such a traumatic childhood and a difficult relationship with his parents, I guess that was his way of kind of giving children the childhood that he didn't get, I suppose.
Yes. And also for him to get back to being a kid, he kind of, we all used to laugh that, he just kind of a big kid at heart anyway. And he just loved being with the kids and their families. He just loved it.
Yeah. And I know you've carried that on. You serve as the ambassador and spokesperson for Serious Fun Children's Network. Tell us about the work that you do there.
Well, I always say I've got the best job in the world. I get to travel around and speak about something that I'm so incredibly passionate about. The Serious Fun Children's Network has now grown to 30 camps and programs all over the world, and we serve 150,000 children and their families completely free of charge. Dad started our first camp almost 35 years ago. It's pretty hard to imagine. And it's incredible how they've grown and frankly, how incredibly creative and devoted all of our program and medical staff were to, pivot and create programs for kids during COVID and families during COVID. Thank God we're emerging from that. But it's some of the most spectacular people I know are involved with our camps. And frankly, the children and their families are just, they do my heart good.
Oh, wonderful. And I know you were involved and interviewed for recently for the docu-series that Ethan Hawke put together, The Last Movie Stars. That was about your mum and dad, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah, that was really fun. Ethan did an amazing job, but again, my best friend Emily Wachtel and her production team were the ones that actually started the project, and then we brought in Ethan to direct and Martin Scorsese to be the executive producer, and they did just an extraordinary job. I mean, the amount of time and energy it took for them to put together all of that material. Initially, it was supposed to be a 2-hour movie, and then it got expanded and expanded and expanded, and then it became a 6-part series. There's just so much material on my parents and all the neat things they've done. So I'm very blessed to be a part of that project and just be able to enjoy the great work that they did and the way that they told my parents' story. It was wonderful.
Yeah. How wonderful to have so many legacies of your mother and father, the philanthropy, the book now, the docu-series, and plus, of course, the bodies of work that they did throughout their lives. I mean, it's just wonderful to have that after they've gone, sadly.
Yeah, well, it's pretty exciting to be a part of all these projects, but what's even more wonderful is just looking at all the footage and reading all the stories and hearing Dad's voice. I miss him terribly. So it's just been nice. It's hard, but it's been really nice to hear his voice.
Yeah.
In all the transcripts. And so, yeah, and I'm grateful to everybody who's helped put these projects together. Mm-hmm. It's been a labor of love for sure.
Well, it's been a huge pleasure to have you with us on the book show. Clea Newman, thank you so much for joining us. If listeners want to get a copy of the book, I'm sure they will. It's called The Extraordinary Life of an Ordinary Man, a memoir by Paul Newman, and it's available on our website, TRE.radio. Clea Newman, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you again so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.